Okay, so now we're going to start talking about views, and this is actually a really easy unit. You're going to be surprised by how little there is by way of new material. But basically, a view is like a window into your database, and there are certain reasons why we would want to use them. But here's a good example. I'll just jump right into this. Let's say we have a human resources database with all of the employees at a company, and we have the employee table, say, has the employee ID, their name, their address, their phone number, basic, contact information. But it also has some sensitive data, like their social security number and maybe their salary grade, or even the number of the money that they're making. And that's fine. I mean, a certain obviously, like high level admin people in the human resources department are going to have to see that data. But let's say there's a lower level admin who cannot see that data, is not privy to that sensitive data, but that person still needs the contact information, the name, the address, the phone number, in case they have to do a mailing. Maybe they have to send out an invitation to the company party and they need everybody's addresses. So what we can do is create a view based on this table, but exclude those sensitive columns. So we can create a view which is like a window into this table, but it's a limited window into that table. And now the kind of the lower level admin who has to send out the invitations will have access to this data, but not the sensitive data. And he or she can also use this, like treat this as like a table. To the user, it's transparent. The user is going to think they're just looking at an employee table and these are the columns. They don't need to know that there are some hidden columns that they're not seeing. So with that in mind, let's look at our document, our lecture document. Before I dive into the problems here, these two bullet points are basically what I was just talking about with the human resources example. But also, you can use views to kind of simplify complex queries. For example, last week we did subqueries, and you can see how convoluted some of that code can get when you're doing subqueries. So what you could do is create a view. A view is really just like a query that's saved as an object in the database. So you can create a view based on a complex subquery, and then query that view, which would be a lot cleaner code than having it all right there with all the ins and outs and the subqueries and whatnot. So anyway, let's look at number one so I can show you how easy this is. We are going to create a view called just Venchi, which will allow all SWC inventory items for the vendor Venchi with the vendor ID of 100. Now, the first thing I'll say is because we're creating objects, you're going to have to be using your student database. You can't use the read-only SWC database, because that's read-only. You cannot write, you cannot create objects there. So now we're switching back to our student databases. So here's how I want you to approach views. You will first get the query going. And really, this is just asking for, what is it asking for? Let's see. Okay, it will display all SWC inventory items for the vendor Venchi. Okay, so I'm basically just querying the inventory table, so I'm going to do that. And this is the type of thing we would have been doing a few chapters ago, right? Just selecting from the inventory table where the vendor ID equals 100, which is the Venchi inventory. And what I do is I always run it and make sure I get meaningful data that makes sense. So it's good, it's a good query. Now I'm ready to create a view based on that query. So here's what you do. And this is all of the new material that you have this week. Check this out. That's it. Okay, you say create, view, you give it a nice name. I told you what I wanted you to name it, just _ Venchi as, and then there's the query. So when I run this, okay, no news is good news. I am going to, let's see, I'm in database 1 here. Let me make sure I can see it here. Oh, there's database 1. Okay, so I think I'm going to refresh database 1. I'm over on the left here. Okay, and I'm going to drill down And you can see we haven't been in this views folder yet, but now is the time. So I'm going to drill down into there. I have a bunch of other stuff from previous semesters, but there it is, the just Vinci view that I just created. Okay, and yeah, so like if you wanted to see the data in it, you could just right click. So it's like a table. It's not a table, but it's like a table, and it behaves like a table. So I could right click that, select top 1,000 rows like we would a table, and there it is. Okay, so one more quick thing, and then I'll end this video and move on to the next problem. Here's something you might run into. When you're creating a view, this statement here, create view as, has got to be the first thing in the file, in your script file. So for example, if you forget to comment out your use statement, you're going to get an error, and it says create view must be the only statement in the batch. Basically, it's got to be the first thing that SQL Server sees in the file. So make sure you don't have this hanging out here. Just go ahead and comment that out. And then when you're ready to move on to the next problem, you've got to make sure you comment this out. Comment out the previous problem. Oh, and one more thing. Okay, I ran this statement once. I'm going to run it again. Okay, this is not a problem. It says there is already an object named just Vinci in the database. So when you're creating a view, you're creating that, and now it already exists. So I go to create it again, I'm going to get an error. It's saying, hey, what are you trying to do? This thing already exists. So don't think that you've made a mistake here. This is news. This means that you did what you were supposed to do, and the view is created. So you can always go over here on the left and check that views folder and make sure the view is in there. Okay, so I'll move on to another video for the next problem.